Okay, I'm so glad that we're able to come back and start doing more of these fun little videos. And again, little. The intention is always to be as short as possible and as awake as possible. But I find, as you know, that the best time to do this, American Central Time near Chicago, is like 4 o'clock in the morning. Because the puppies are all asleep, mommy's asleep, the neighborhood's asleep, no one's waking up yet. And that's why I do this. Now, also, well, geez, do you wake up and do this? No, I let the dogs out. Well, how many dogs you got? I got 3 dogs. And I'll let them all out, and most of the time I can't go back to sleep, as you would imagine. Because if I let them out at 3, I might as well come down here and goof around for a while, right? With this all-consuming hobby that I have been involved in since I was very, very small, very wee. Again, thanks to my upbringing in Toronto, where everything was British imported, if you will. Actually, that's not entirely true. A lot of Japanese imports as well, but the scale of the models were 176. Fujimi was huge. And Hasegawa came in, but Hasegawa was 172 scale stuff. And so, Airfix, being the HO00, whatever you want to call it, it wasn't the same. Airfix stuff was really closer to 187 scale, which is like mini tank scale. It was close. It was just a little odd. Airfix has always been that way. They made these casts, the molds, I should say, in a certain way. And so their Tiger, the Sherman, the Panther, everything, the Panzer IV, which was a good model, by the way, were always a little too small, by 1/4 of an inch in length compared to the Hasegawa 172. Was it noticeable? Maybe. Sometimes. The barrels were definitely noticeable. And everything else was obviously smaller for the Airfix stuff. But it was cheap. And we were able at the time to afford a lot of it. So, in some of our games in Toronto, up at the Brampton Library, back in the 70s, guys had 50 tanks on the game table. Yeah, 50 tanks, 50 landing craft, 50 this, 50 that, 50 bridges, tons and tons and tons. And of course the infantry was all mounted and painted. It wasn't just, clumps of plastic. It was really, really good. And there were some guys who did Western Desert, or the desert stuff in Africa. That was incredible. And we're not talking about a 6x4 table or a 8x5. We're talking about 16 feet long. Okay? 5 feet deep, 16 feet long. And that's a long-ass table. That's a big-ass battle. Did we do Alamein? I don't remember. Possibly. But it's always the same thing. You avoid the big battles. You go for the small stuff. 50 tanks on a game table is small. Well, 1 for 1. 1 tank was 1 tank. Was one guy? I don't think so. I think even then, the rules that we were using, or the guys were using, I think it was 1 stand was 1 squad. I don't think it was man for man. It wasn't skirmish level. Well, it depends. It's a misnomer. Skirmish level is 1 man equals 1 man, and 1 vehicle is 1 vehicle, and 1 fence post is 1 fence post. It's squad leader. All right. Just double checking, make sure I'm okay. I'm probably over-modulating, but that's okay, because the phone is hanging low. Okay, that being said, that's where I got started. And then after World War II stuff went into Napoleonics and Ancients and everything else, Airfix, and then American Civil War. And then things really changed. Okay, so what we're looking at here is table of terrain, sans trees. As I mentioned the other time, before you put the trees down, it's best to put the fabric down that's going to be underneath the trees. So then when you pick a tree hex up, there's a fabric there showing where it was. So the best thing to do here is to put down the fabric first. But before I go there, let me go here. And that is, if you'll notice, where's my pointer? There's a little, is that thing still bright? Relatively? It's a very close color. I don't know why this is asking me to make the PDF my default. Well, of course make it my default. Why wouldn't you? That's crazy. I don't know why all of a sudden in the middle of making this video, an Acrobat thing came up. Oh, probably because there is another push update. Anyway, so over here, interesting, right? Look how close it is in color. That's a piece of masking tape. I added it because this region of the game table potentially had no value, and now it does. Because there's a road here connecting these two roads. And it's a masking tape, so it should peel off the fabric okay. Not a big issue. It shouldn't leave any bad residue. But this is the deal. I added this road, and it seems to imply more value to this region of the game table. Why'd I do it? Because it didn't have much value. There's nothing really over here yet. So that's why I did that. When you look at the game, I love this little pointer. This actually is a huge pointer. It's like a broadsword. It's really long. And it's extendable. All right, so as you can see, the fields are potentially, actually, all the hills and all the fields are potentially problematic. Because if you can imagine, this is really complicated. This is very complex. This is very tight, right? Tight. The hills, there's plenty of hills here, and this is probably more hills than a 4x3 game table we've ever had. Because I was curious what would happen if I replicated the area around Vicksburg where it's like, or Shiloh, where it's like cut, and there's elevation that's cut and it's cut. So the guys are forced to, the troops are forced to go up and down, and eventually they get to the top and they're exhausted. Well, here, we don't know the era just yet. We remember, as we said, we're not quite sure what we want to do here. It's not going to be ancients, but it's going to be, it could be mechanized, it could be Nova, or it could be American Civil War, horse and musket. I don't know. I kind of like to want to see the American Revolution, because seeing as we're on July 4th, excuse me, I kind of want to see the American Revolution guys out there. So this could be somewhere around, I don't know, some very hilly terrain in the American Revolution. Okay, added. This is marsh. We're 3D printing. And it's interesting that it kind of glows like this on the camera. It's kind of silvery because it's gray filament. So there we are. And we're going to obviously, paint that blue first. Probably just spray paint it. And then touch it with some green to give it some life. And so what do you do with a marsh? Well, where does a marsh usually exist? Okay, obviously marsh exists in an area of low land that has some drainage to it, but not a lot of drainage. So that's why it exists. An example would be this area right here, where it's a fork in a creek or something. And typically you would have a marshy area around this, right? Actually, I'm going to move this hill a little bit. And also I want to say about the hills, I have not put the hex grid on the hills yet. Where do you want to put the hex grid? I don't know. Do you put it on the top level? Kind of. But the biggest piece is where you want to put the hex grid. Okay, you gotta, because you gotta have some standard of orientation. Even if it doesn't match what's underneath it, as long as it has a hex grid on it, then you can have some a semblance of orientation on the hill itself. Not that you want to match the hexagon grid of the hill to the hexagon grid underneath it, because that gets a little wonky and it locks you into how the hill can be put on the game table. You just want to have a measurement ability on the hill. So what I would normally do is take this first level and put a hex grid on it. And then whatever stacking level you put on it, you can just use pencil and trace that grid onto the next levels all around up. So you have some semblance of you know, the grid that you're going to move on. Or, as I was saying at one time, treat the top level as one hex. And all the other levels are just in the way, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, you get the idea. Having the hex grid, this is the only downside to having a hex grid game system, and that is when it comes to elevations, you kind of really have to trace a hex grid on that elevation, which is what I just haven't got around to doing yet, and hopefully we'll do it soon, especially on that big flat one right there, this guy. So that, you know, obviously they're big, at least they're big area, big flat area where a hex grid should exist. Okay, so that being said, we're going to paint the marsh. The fence, yeah, I know. See, when we committed to the shape of the field being square or rectangular, you can't do this kind of thing. You can't put a fence in there. The only way to do that would be to choose your orientation. Which way do you want it? You want it like this, or you want it on the road? There, or the road? All right. Okay, that's the point. And then move on from there. And so after this, we choose the size of the buildings and we put the trees out and we see exactly what kind of a scenario we're looking at. Again, my thinking is a nice American Rev, or let's put it this way, a nice horse and musket game would be fun to do. But then again, with nothing on the game table, picking up the fields, leave the marsh, of course, but picking up the fields themselves would then open it up to a science fiction thing where you have a potential for Battletech or Hex Command NOVA. Okay, so we'll come back. We'll do some more thinking, and maybe we'll decide exactly what era we're doing. We're doing this we're taking our time. So thanks for watching, and we will come back with another episode. Things will hopefully be, we got some orientations that need to be adjusted, like this here, for instance, should probably be like that, so that you don't have this quarter hex, half hex business. Let's do it like this guy, so that's like a valley, right? And it also gives some value, or no, it doesn't. Okay, so there's no, the game table ends right there, doesn't it? Yeah, the game table ends right there. So, we'll come back and have some more fun when we get figured it out what we're doing.